Sign it. Sign it now, or I will make sure every door in this city closes in your face forever." Victoria Harrington slammed the divorce papers down so hard, the crystal glasses on the table trembled. She didn't look at Olivia like a person. She looked at her like dirt she wanted scraped off the bottom of her $1,000 heel. And the worst part, the part that would haunt Olivia for weeks, was that her husband Ethan stood 3 feet away, watching his mother humiliate the woman he once swore to protect, and he said nothing, not one word. He just looked at the floor. If you believe a woman should never beg for the love of someone who already decided to throw her away, then stay with me until the very end of this story, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Please take 1 second to subscribe to this channel and follow Olivia's journey all the way to the end. And tell me in the comments right now, what city are you watching from? I genuinely love to see how far this story travels around the world. Now let's begin. The penthouse was the kind of place most people only see in magazines. 40 floors above downtown Chicago, glass on every wall, marble under every step. Olivia Carter had lived there for 3 years, and in all that time she had never once felt like she belonged. That morning, standing in the center of that beautiful cold room, she finally understood why. She had given up everything for this. Her dreams of opening her own design studio, her independence, her own name almost. And in return, the Harrington family had decided she was a problem to be solved. Victoria Harrington stood like a queen who had just won a war. 62 years old, silver hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful pearls at her throat that cost more than most people earn in a year. She had hated Olivia from the very first dinner 3 years ago, and she had spent every day since waiting for this exact moment. "You heard me," Victoria said, her voice smooth as ice. "Sign the papers. Take your little suitcase and disappear from my son's life. We have been patient long enough." Olivia's hands were perfectly still. That surprised her. She had imagined this scene 100 times in her worst nightmares, and in every version she was shaking, crying, falling apart. But now that it was real, something strange settled over her, a calm she didn't recognize. "Ethan," she said quietly, turning to her husband, "is this what you want?" He still wouldn't look at her. He was a handsome man, 34 years old, the kind of face that opened doors and closed deals. But standing there in his tailored suit, avoiding her eyes, he looked smaller than she had ever seen him. "Ethan," she said again, "look at me. After 3 years, you can at least look at me." He lifted his head, and what she saw in his eyes was not love, not regret, not even sadness. It was relief. He was relieved this was finally over. "It's better this way, Liv," he said. His voice was flat, rehearsed. "We want different things. You never really understood my world." "Your world?" Olivia almost laughed. "I gave up my entire life to fit into your world. I learned which fork to use. I memorized the names of 300 people who looked through me like I was glass. I stayed quiet at every dinner while your mother insulted me to my face. I did all of that for you." Victoria stepped forward. "And it was never enough, dear, because you simply do not have it. Breeding, class. You are a small-town girl who got lucky, and luck always runs out." "Mother," Ethan murmured, but it was the weakest word ever spoken. Not a defense, just a reflex. Olivia looked at the two of them, mother and son, standing together against her, and she felt the last thread of something inside her finally snap. Not loudly, quietly, like a candle being blown out. "You want to know the truth?" Victoria continued, walking slowly around the room, as if she owned the very air. "I knew from the moment Ethan brought you home. I told him. I said that girl smells like ambition. She sees our name, our fortune, and she wants in. A social climber. And do you know what is funny? You climbed all the way up here, 40 floors in the sky, and you still arrived with nothing, and you will leave with nothing." There it was. The accusation Olivia had heard whispered behind her back at every party. Social climber. Gold digger. Burden. A mistake. If only they knew. But Olivia said none of that. She picked up the pen. "Wait," Ethan said suddenly, and for half a second her heart did something stupid, something hopeful. But then he finished his sentence. "The penthouse, the car, the jewelry, those stay. They were gifts, technically family assets. I had the lawyers note that. You understand." And that was the moment. That was the exact second Olivia Carter stopped grieving her marriage and started seeing it clearly for the first time. 3 years. She had given him 3 years, her loyalty, her youth, her dreams. And on the last morning he was worried about the watches. "Of course," she said softly. I wouldn't dream of taking anything that was yours." She signed her name, Olivia Carter. The pen moved smoothly across the line. No tears, no trembling. Victoria watched with a thin, satisfied smile, the smile of a woman who had finally exterminated a pest. "There," Victoria said. "Was that so hard? Some women make such a scene. Crying, screaming, begging. So undignified. At least you know your place." "I'm beginning to," Olivia replied. "More than you realize." There was something in her tone that made Victoria's smile flicker just for an instant. But the older woman dismissed it. Defeated women said strange things. It meant nothing. A maid was already waiting by the door with Olivia's single suitcase. One suitcase. 3 years of marriage reduced to one piece of luggage. Olivia walked toward it, and Ethan cleared his throat. "Liv, I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do." She stopped. She turned. And she looked at him, the man she had once loved with her whole heart, the man who had promised her forever in front of 200 guests. "Ethan, I want you to remember this morning," she said. "Not because I want you to feel guilty. I want you to remember it because one day, and it will be sooner than you think, you are going to understand exactly what you threw away today. And on that day, I want you to know that I gave you every chance to look at me, and you chose the floor." He blinked, confused. Victoria scoffed. "How poetic. Goodbye, dear. Do close the door on your way out." Olivia took the handle of her suitcase, and she walked out of the penthouse without looking back. The heavy door clicked shut behind her, and on the other side of it, she could already hear them, laughing. She heard Victoria's voice loud and triumphant. "I told you, Ethan. I told you she'd fold like paper. Now Madison is exactly the kind of girl we need. Old money, real connections. Tonight we celebrate. Madison." So there was already someone else. Olivia stood in the silent hallway, and she let herself feel it, all of it. The betrayal, the humiliation, the sheer cold cruelty of it. She let it wash over her completely, and then she set it down, the way you set down a heavy bag you've been carrying too long. The elevator ride down took 90 seconds. By the time the doors opened in the lobby, Olivia Carter was already gone. Someone else was about to take her place. The sun was just rising over Lake Michigan when she stepped out onto the sidewalk. The doorman, a kind older gentleman named Frank, who had always been gentle with her, looked at her single suitcase, and his face fell. "Mrs. Harrington, is everything? Are you all right?" "It's not Mrs. Harrington anymore, Frank," she said, and she smiled at him, a real smile, the first one in months. "And yes, for the first time in 3 years, everything is going to be all right." She walked half a block away from the building, away from the eyes, and she pulled out her phone, not the phone Ethan had given her, a different one, an old one she kept buried at the bottom of her purse. A phone that had not rung in 3 years because she had refused to answer the call of who she really was. She scrolled to a contact saved under one word, grandfather. Her thumb hovered over it. Once she pressed that button, there was no going back. The life she had run away from, the legacy she had abandoned, the man whose disappointment she had been hiding from for 3 years, all of it would come rushing back. She thought about the laughter behind the penthouse door. She thought about Ethan worrying over the watches. She thought about Victoria's words, "You arrived with nothing, and you will leave with nothing." She pressed the button. It rang once, twice, and then a voice answered, a deep, weathered voice that carried decades of authority, and underneath it something she had almost forgotten. Love. Olivia. Just her name. He had been waiting. He had always been waiting. "Grandfather," she said, and for the first time that entire morning her voice cracked just slightly. "I'm ready to come home." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. She could picture him, 81 years old, sitting in his enormous study in Virginia, surrounded by the empire he had built from nothing. "It took you 3 years to make that call," William Blackwell said. "I expected it to take 5. You were always stubborn. I'm sorry. I know I disappointed you. I ran off with a man you warned me about. I threw away everything you tried to give me, and now I'm crawling back with one suitcase and a failed marriage. Olivia, listen to me very carefully." His voice softened. "You did not disappoint me when you left. You disappointed me only just now when you said the word crawling. A Blackwell does not crawl. Where are you? Chicago, downtown. I know exactly where you are. I have known where you were every single day for 3 years. Olivia's breath caught. "What? Did you truly believe I would let my only granddaughter wander into the lion's den without watching the gate now? Stay exactly where you are. Find a coffee shop, order something warm, and wait. A car will be there within 20 minutes. The jet is already being prepared. You are coming home, Olivia, and we have a great deal of work to do." She stood frozen on that Chicago sidewalk, tears finally rising in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, something else entirely. "Grandfather," she whispered. "They don't know. None of them. They have no idea who I am." And on the other end of the line, William Blackwell allowed himself something he rarely did. He laughed low and quiet and full of meaning. "No, my dear," he said. "They don't. But they're going to find out. The whole city is going to find out. Now go get your coffee. And Olivia, hold your head up. The granddaughter of William Blackwell does not slump on a street corner. Not anymore." The line went dead. Olivia lowered the phone slowly. For 3 years she had been Olivia Carter, the timid wife, the burden, the social climber who never belonged. For 3 years she had shrunk herself smaller and smaller, hoping that if she took up less space, they might finally let her stay. She was done shrinking. She found a small coffee shop on the corner. The young woman behind the counter smiled at her. "What can I get you?" "A black coffee," Olivia said, and then she paused and added, "Actually make it the best thing you have. I'm celebrating." "Oh, nice. What's the occasion?" Olivia looked out the window at the building she had just walked out of, that beautiful, cold tower in the sky, where a family was right now toasting champagne over her destruction. "I just got my life back," she said. She sat by the window and she waited. And as she waited, the memories came, the ones she had locked away. She remembered being 8 years old, sitting on her grandfather's knee in that enormous study, asking him why the family was so rich. And she remembered his answer, the one she had never forgotten. "We are not rich, Olivia. Rich is what you have. We are powerful. Power is what you are, and the two are not the same. A poor man can be powerful, and a rich man can be weak. Never confuse them." She remembered being 18 the day she told him she wanted to study art and design, that she didn't want the empire. He hadn't been angry. He had simply said, "Then learn to design beautiful things, but learn to lead first. The world breaks beautiful things that cannot protect themselves." And she remembered being 24 the day she met Ethan Harrington at a conference in New York. Handsome, charming, ambitious. She had told him her name was Olivia Carter, her mother's maiden name. She had wanted just once to be loved for herself, not for the Blackwell fortune. She had wanted to know if she was lovable as just a girl. Now she had her answer. She was not. Or at least Ethan Harrington was not capable of it. He had loved the idea of her, the convenience of her, right up until the moment his mother offered him a better deal. Olivia sipped her coffee. It was excellent. She made a mental note. Small pleasures. She had forgotten how to enjoy them. Exactly 19 minutes later, a black car pulled up outside. Not a flashy car. A serious one. The kind that government officials and old money families used precisely because they did not want to be noticed. A driver in a dark suit stepped out, scanned the street, and then walked directly to the coffee shop door. He found her instantly, as though he had been shown her photograph 1,000 times. "Miss Blackwell," he said, and the name landed on her like warm sunlight. "I'm Daniels. Your grandfather sent me. The aircraft is fueled and waiting. May I take your bag? Miss Blackwell, not Mrs. Harrington, not Olivia Carter. Blackwell." "Yes, Daniels," she said, standing tall, her voice steady and clear. "You may." He reached for the single suitcase, the one that held everything she now owned in the world, and for a moment Olivia almost stopped him. It felt wrong to hand over so little, but Daniels took it as though it were the most precious cargo in America, and he held the door for her and he said, "Right this way, Miss Blackwell. Welcome back." As she walked towards the car, Olivia caught her reflection in the dark glass window. She barely recognized herself. The same face, yes, but the eyes were different. 3 years of being told she was nothing had carved something out of her, and now in the space where that emptiness had been something new was growing. Something hard and bright and unbreakable. She thought about Victoria Harrington's parting words. "You arrived with nothing, and you will leave with nothing." "We'll see about that," Olivia said softly to her reflection. She slid into the back seat. The leather was cool and smelled of money, but not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that didn't need to prove anything. As the car pulled away from the curb, she looked up one last time at the penthouse tower, disappearing behind her. 40 floors up, Ethan Harrington was clinking glasses with his mother and his new fiancée, congratulating himself on a problem cleanly solved. He had no idea. He had spent the last year of his career chasing a single enormous business deal, a merger that he believed would make him untouchable, that would finally earn his mother's full approval, that would crown him as Chicago's newest titan. He had bet absolutely everything on it. What Ethan Harrington did not know, what he could not possibly know, was that the merger he was betting his entire future on had one final obstacle: a controlling shareholder hidden behind a wall of holding companies, a silent partner with the power to approve the deal or kill it with a single signature, a name buried so deep in the paperwork that Ethan's lawyers had never even managed to identify it. He would learn that name soon enough. The car merged onto the highway, heading toward the executive airport. Daniels caught her eye in the rearview mirror. "Your grandfather wanted me to tell you something, Miss Blackwell," he said, and these are his exact words: "Do not waste your energy on hatred. Hatred is a small fire that burns the one who holds it. We are going to do something far more powerful than hate." Olivia leaned back against the seat. "And what's that, Daniels?" The driver almost smiled. "He didn't say, miss. He said you'd figure it out on the way home." She closed her eyes, and she thought about it. Revenge would be easy. She could destroy the Harrington family with a few phone calls. She could ruin Ethan, bankrupt his company, leave Victoria penniless and humiliated, make them feel a fraction of what she had felt that morning. The power was already almost in her hands. But her grandfather was right. That was small. That was the kind of thing the old Olivia Carter, broken and bleeding, would have wanted in the first raw hours of her pain. She was already becoming someone larger than that. The car turned through a private gate, and there on the tarmac, gleaming white in the morning sun, sat a Gulfstream jet with one small word painted near the door: Blackwell. Olivia stepped out of the car. The wind off the runway pulled at her hair. Daniels carried her single suitcase up the steps, and at the top, standing in the doorway of the aircraft, was a woman in a crisp uniform who bowed her head respectfully. "Welcome aboard, Miss Blackwell. Your grandfather is on the line and would like to speak with you the moment we're airborne. He says there's a board meeting in 3 days, and he expects you to be ready to take your seat." Olivia paused at the bottom of the steps. She thought about the girl who had walked out of that penthouse 40 minutes ago with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. And she thought about the woman who was about to walk up these steps. They were the same person, but not anymore. She placed her foot on the first step, then the second. And with every step she climbed, she felt the timid wife falling away behind her, peeling off like an old coat she'd been wearing for far too long. At the top, she turned and looked one last time at the Chicago skyline, glittering in the early light. Somewhere out there, the Harrington family was celebrating. Somewhere out there, Ethan was already forgetting she existed. "Enjoy the party," she whispered to the city. "Enjoy every minute of it." Then Olivia Blackwell stepped inside, and the cabin door closed behind her with a soft, final, irreversible sound. The engines began to roar, and as the jet lifted off the runway and climbed into the morning sky, carrying her away from the wreckage of the woman she used to be and toward the woman she was always meant to become. Olivia opened her eyes and looked down at the city growing smaller and smaller beneath her. She was not running away this time. She was rising. The Blackwell estate in Virginia was not a house. It was a kingdom. 300 acres of rolling green hills, stone walls older than the country itself, and at the center of it all, a mansion that had sheltered 4 generations of one of America's most powerful families. Olivia had grown up running through these halls, and now stepping out of the car after 3 years away, she felt like a stranger returning to a dream she had tried to forget. William Blackwell was waiting for her on the front steps. 81 years old, standing tall on a silver-headed cane, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Ethan's entire wardrobe. His eyes, sharp and pale blue, found her instantly, and for a long moment, neither of them said anything. Then Olivia did something she had not planned to do. She dropped her suitcase, crossed the gravel, and threw her arms around the old man like she was 8 years old again. "I'm sorry," she whispered into his shoulder. "I'm so sorry, grandfather." He held her, one hand on the back of her head, the other gripping his cane. "Enough of that," he said gruffly, but his voice was thick. "You're home. That's all that matters now." She pulled back and wiped her eyes, embarrassed. "You're not going to lecture me. Tell me you warned me about him. Tell me I was a fool." "Would it help?" "No." "Then I won't bother." He turned and began walking into the house, gesturing for her to follow. "Besides, you already know everything I would say. You knew it the moment that man worried about his watches instead of his wife." Olivia froze on the step. How did you? I never told you that. How could you possibly know about the watches? William stopped at the door and looked back at her, and there was something in his expression that sent a chill down her spine. Olivia, sit down with me. There are things you need to understand, and the first thing is this. I have not spent the last 3 years simply watching you suffer from a distance like some helpless old man. I have been waiting, and I have been preparing. They sat in the study, the same enormous room from her childhood walls lined with books and the smell of leather and old paper. A servant brought tea. William waved her away and poured it himself. 3 years ago, he began, when you told me you were marrying Ethan Harrington, I made a decision. I decided not to stop you. You couldn't have stopped me. I was in love. I could have stopped you in 100 different ways, he said calmly, and the certainty in his voice made her believe it completely. I chose not to, because you needed to learn something that I could never teach you with words. You needed to learn the difference between someone who loves you and someone who loves what you can give them. And the only way to learn that, painful as it is, was to give a man absolutely nothing and see if he stayed. Olivia set down her tea. Her hand was not quite steady. So you let me marry him. You let me suffer for 3 years. As a what a lesson. No, his voice sharpened. Not as a lesson. As a test that I prayed you would fail. I prayed every single day that Ethan Harrington would turn out to be a good man, that he would love my granddaughter for nothing more than her heart. If he had, I would have welcomed him into this family and never spoken a word of who you really are. He paused. He failed the test, Olivia. Not you. Never you. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question that had been burning in her since the phone call that morning. You said you knew where I was every day. You said you knew about the watches. Grandfather, how much do you actually know about what happened in that penthouse? William reached into the drawer of his desk and slid a thick folder across to her. She opened it, and her blood ran cold. It was a surveillance file. Photographs, financial records, and a list of dates going back almost a year detailing private meetings between Ethan Harrington and a woman named Madison Sterling. Long before the divorce, long before that morning. He was seeing her, Olivia breathed, for a year, while I was still his wife. 11 months, William corrected gently. The engagement to Miss Sterling was arranged by Victoria Harrington 6 months ago. They were simply waiting for the right moment to discard you. They timed it, Olivia. They chose that specific morning. Why that morning? Why then? And here William Blackwell leaned forward, and his eyes lit with something cold and brilliant. Because of the merger. Tell me, did Ethan ever speak to you about a major deal, something he called the most important deal of his life? Constantly. Olivia's mind was racing now. For the last year, it's all he talked about. Some massive merger that was going to make his company untouchable. He said it would finally make his mother proud of him. He bet everything on it. He mortgaged things, took on debt. He told me failure was not an option. And do you know why he needed the divorce finalized before that gala in 3 weeks? She shook her head slowly. Because the merger requires the approval of a controlling shareholder, a silent partner who holds the deciding vote. The Harringtons have spent 8 months and a fortune in legal fees, trying to identify who that shareholder is, so they can court them, flatter them, win their approval. William smiled, and it was the smile of a man holding 4 aces. They never found out, because the shareholder is buried beneath 11 layers of holding companies that all trace back to one place. Olivia stared at him. The room seemed to tilt. Here, she whispered, they trace back here. They trace back to Blackwell Global Holdings. And as of your 25th birthday 2 years ago, that controlling stake belongs to exactly one person. He let the silence stretch. You, Olivia. You hold the vote that decides whether Ethan Harrington's entire future lives or dies. The man who threw you away on his knees this morning has been desperately searching for the one person who controls his fate. And he was married to her the whole time. The folder slipped from Olivia's hands and papers scattered across the floor. She did not move to pick them up. She simply sat there, the full staggering weight of it crashing over her. He has no idea, she finally said. None whatsoever. A long, strange silence filled the study, and then something happened that surprised them both. Olivia began to laugh, not a bitter laugh, not a vengeful one, a stunned, disbelieving, almost helpless laugh that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her. 3 years, she said, shaking her head. 3 years he made me feel like I was nothing, like I should be grateful he tolerated me. And the entire time, the one thing he wanted most in the world, the only thing standing between him and everything he'd ever dreamed of, was sitting right next to him at the dinner table, and he never even looked. He never looked, William agreed quietly. That, my dear, is the difference between a powerful man and a small one. A powerful man pays attention. Olivia's laughter faded. She bent down and gathered the scattered papers, and when she straightened up, her grandfather saw something new in her face. The shock was gone. In its place was a clarity that frightened and thrilled him in equal measure. "You want me to kill the merger," she said. "I want you to do nothing of the sort. Not yet." He stood and walked to the window, his cane tapping softly. "Olivia, if all you do is destroy that deal out of anger, then Ethan Harrington wins. Do you understand me? If you let him turn you into a weapon of revenge, then he has changed who you are. He will have made you smaller even in victory. I did not bring you home to watch you become bitter. I brought you home to watch you become whole." "Then what do you want from me?" He turned to face her. "I want you to earn the right to make that decision. Right now, you hold the power by accident of birth. You inherited it. But a Blackwell does not simply hold power. A Blackwell understands it. So before you ever step into the same room as the Harringtons again, you are going to learn this business from the ground up. You have 3 weeks until that gala. I am going to teach you everything I know in 21 days. And when you walk into that ballroom, you will not walk in as Ethan's wounded ex-wife seeking revenge. You will walk in as the most qualified person in the room to decide whether his company deserves to exist." Olivia held his gaze. "And if I learn all of it, and I still decide the deal is bad, if I kill it not out of revenge, but because it genuinely deserves to die?" William Blackwell smiled, and this time it was a smile of pure pride. "Then that, my dear, will be the most beautiful revenge of all, because no one will ever be able to call it revenge. They will only be able to call it justice." The next morning, Olivia's education began, and it was nothing like she expected. William did not ease her in. At 5:30 in the morning, a knock came on her door, and a stern woman named Mrs. Aldridge informed her that her grandfather expected her in the study in 15 minutes, dressed and ready. When Olivia arrived, the desk was buried in financial reports. "Read these," William said without looking up. "All of them. You have until noon." "Grandfather, there are hundreds of pages here. I can't possibly understand." "I did not ask you to understand. I asked you to read. Understanding comes later. First, you stop being afraid of the paper." And that was the lesson of the first day. Stop being afraid. For 3 years, Olivia had been afraid. Afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of Victoria's contempt, afraid of being seen as stupid or unworthy. She had made herself small to survive, and now page by page that fear began to crack. By the end of the first week, she was sitting in on real meetings, real executives, real decisions, billions of dollars on the table. At first she said nothing, just listened the way her grandfather instructed. But William watched her carefully, and he noticed something. She was not just listening, she was seeing things. Patterns, weaknesses, lies. On the 8th day, during a tense negotiation with a logistics company, Olivia spoke for the first time. The room had been going in circles for an hour over a shipping contract. "Excuse me," she said quietly. Every head turned. She was, after all, an unknown young woman who had been sitting silently in the corner. "Their numbers don't reconcile. On page 40 of their proposal, they list a fleet of 200 vehicles, but the maintenance budget on page 63 only accounts for 140. Either they're lying about the size of their fleet, or 60 of those trucks don't actually run. I'd want to know which before we sign anything." The room went silent. The lead negotiator from the other company turned a shade of gray, and William Blackwell, sitting at the head of the table, did not smile. But under the table, his hand tightened on his cane with quiet, fierce satisfaction. After the meeting, he found her in the hall. "Where did you learn to read a budget like that?" "I didn't learn it here," she said. "I learned it from Ethan, actually, watching him at dinner parties. He'd come home and brag about deals, and I'd ask questions, and he'd laugh and tell me not to worry my pretty head about things I couldn't understand." She looked at her grandfather. "So I started reading on my own, quietly, at night after he was asleep. I think I understood his business better than he did. He just never let me say so." William stared at her for a long moment. "He had a brilliant woman in his home," he said slowly, "and he treated her like furniture. My God, the man is even more of a fool than I thought." Each day, Olivia grew. The timid wife who had flinched at her mother-in-law's voice was disappearing. In her place stood a woman who walked into rooms and made them quieter, who asked questions that made grown men sweat, who read a balance sheet the way other people read a face. But it was on the 14th day that everything changed, because on the 14th day, Olivia decided to do something her grandfather had not asked her to do. She decided to read the Harrington merger file herself, not the summary William had given her, the actual deal. Every page. She locked herself in the study for 11 hours, and what she found made her hands go cold. She brought it to William that night, the file open, her finger trembling on a single line. "Grandfather, this merger, it's not just a bad deal. Look at this. The company they're merging with Callaway Industries, their assets are inflated. These valuations are fantasy. And here, look, the debt structure. If this deal closes, it doesn't make Ethan's company stronger. It loads it with $2 billion in hidden debt, and the moment the market shifts, the whole thing collapses." William put on his glasses and studied the page. His expression darkened. "You're certain?" "I checked it 4 times. Grandfather, this deal isn't going to make Ethan untouchable. It's going to destroy his company within 18 months. He's so desperate to impress his mother, so blinded by ambition, that he's about to walk his entire family off a cliff, and he doesn't even see it." She looked up and her face was pale. "If I approve this merger, I'm not helping him. I'm killing him slowly. And if I kill it, I save him, but he'll never know I did it. And he'll hate me forever for taking away his dream." William removed his glasses slowly. "And now," he said softly, "you understand why I told you not to act in anger. Because the truth is far more complicated than revenge. The kindest thing you could do for that man is destroy the deal that would destroy him, and he will despise you for your mercy." Olivia sank into the chair. "What do I do?" "That," William said, "is no longer a question I can answer for you. 3 weeks ago, you would have wanted to crush him. 2 weeks ago, you would have wanted to save him, to prove you were the better person. But now," he studied her, "now I think you're asking a different question entirely. You're asking what's right, and that, Olivia, is the question a true leader asks, so I'll let you sit with it." The days flew by. Olivia barely slept. She studied the merger from every angle. She studied Callaway Industries until she knew it better than its own executives. And slowly, quietly, a plan began to form in her mind. Not a plan for revenge, something far more elegant. On the 19th day, William called her into the study and laid a garment bag across the desk. "The gala is in 2 days, he said. "You'll be attending." "As who?" "As yourself, as Olivia Blackwell. The time for hiding is over." He unzipped the bag, and inside was a gown of deep emerald green, simple and devastating in its elegance. "Your grandmother wore this color the night I proposed to her. Green, the color of new growth, of things that rise from the ground after a long winter." He looked at her, and his eyes were wet. "You've been through your winter, Olivia. It's time." Olivia touched the fabric, and then she asked the question that had been sitting in her chest for 2 days. "Grandfather, the Harringtons will be there. Ethan, Victoria, his new fiancée, the press, investors, everyone. When I walk in, they'll recognize me, and then they'll find out who I am all at once in front of the entire city." "Yes," William said, "they will. It's going to be a spectacle, a scene, exactly the kind of thing Victoria mocked me for, the undignified woman making a scene." "No," William shook his head firmly. "Victoria Harrington makes scenes. You, my dear, are going to make history. There is a difference, and the entire room will feel it the moment you walk through that door." He paused. "Now, the most important question. Have you decided about the merger? Because Ethan is going to announce that deal at the gala. He's going to stand on that stage in front of everyone and stake his entire reputation on it. And you will be sitting in that room, the one person on earth with the power to let it happen or stop it cold." Olivia looked at the emerald gown for a long, long moment. And when she finally spoke, her voice was calm and clear and absolutely certain. There was no fear in it anymore, no bitterness, only the quiet steel of a woman who had finally remembered exactly who she was. "I've decided," she said, and William Blackwell looked at his granddaughter, the timid girl who had walked into his home 18 days ago with one suitcase and a broken heart, now standing tall and unshakable before him, and he knew that whatever she had decided, it would be right. He did not even need to ask what it was. "Good," he said simply. "Then let them celebrate. Let them have their perfect night. Let Ethan Harrington stand on that stage and believe for one last moment that he is the most powerful man in the room. He picked up his cane and walked to the door. Then he stopped, and without turning around, he said the words that would echo in Olivia's mind all the way to Chicago. Because in 2 days, my dear, the entire world is going to learn the name they should have respected all along. And the woman they threw away with one suitcase is going to walk back into their lives on the most powerful aircraft in America, and nothing will ever be the same again. 2 days later, the Starlight Foundation Gala was the most glittering event Chicago had seen in years. Every name that mattered was there. Senators, tech billionaires, old money families who hadn't been in the same room together in a decade. And at the center of it all, glowing under the chandeliers, stood Ethan Harrington, more confident than he had ever been in his life. He looked good. He knew he looked good. Madison Sterling was on his arm in a gown that cost $40,000, and his mother Victoria stood nearby holding court like the queen she believed herself to be. Tonight was the night. Tonight Ethan would announce the merger that would make the Harrington name untouchable. Tonight, finally, his mother would look at him with pride instead of disappointment. "Are you nervous?" Madison whispered, squeezing his arm. "Nervous," Ethan laughed. "Madison, in 1 hour I'm going to be the most important man in this city. The only thing left is the shareholder vote, and the lawyers say that's a formality. Whoever this silent partner is, they'd be insane to walk away from a deal this good." Across the room, Victoria glided over her eyes, scanning the crowd with cold approval. "Everyone who matters is here," she murmured to her son. "The Pattersons, the Vance family, even the governor. By midnight, the entire eastern seaboard will know the Harrington name." She touched his cheek. "I'm proud of you tonight, Ethan. Truly. You finally cleaned up your messes and became the man this family needs." The mess she meant was Olivia, and Ethan felt only the smallest flicker of something guilt maybe before he buried it. "She's probably waiting tables somewhere by now," he said. "I gave her a fair settlement." "You gave her a suitcase," Victoria corrected, smiling thinly, "and it was more than she deserved." They had no way of knowing that at that exact moment, 40 miles away, a Gulfstream jet was beginning its descent toward Chicago Executive Airport. Inside the cabin, Olivia Blackwell sat perfectly still in her emerald gown, watching the city lights spread out beneath her like scattered diamonds. Her grandfather had not come. He had stayed in Virginia. "This is your night," he told her. "A general does not hold his soldier's hand in her first battle, but I will be watching. And Olivia, remember who you are." Her phone buzzed. A text from William. 3 words, "Hold the line." She closed her eyes. For one moment, the old fear tried to rise. The memory of every cruel word, every dinner where she'd been made to feel like nothing, every time she'd shrunk herself smaller to survive. And then she opened her eyes, and the fear was gone. It had nowhere left to live inside her. The jet touched down. 3 black vehicles were waiting on the tarmac, along with a man in a dark suit she recognized. Daniels. "Miss Blackwell," he said, opening her door. "The car is ready. Mr. Blackwell asked me to tell you the entire board is watching the live feed from the gala tonight. They want to see you." Olivia stepped onto the tarmac, the wind catching her gown. "Then let's not keep them waiting, Daniels." Back at the gala, the lights dimmed slightly, and a hush fell over the ballroom as the announcer took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, in just a few moments, our host for the evening, Mr. Ethan Harrington, will be making a very special announcement." Applause rippled through the room. Ethan straightened his jacket. This was it. He glanced at his mother, who gave him a small regal nod. He glanced at Madison, who beamed. Everything was perfect. And then somewhere outside, faint but growing, came a sound. The deep rolling roar of engines. Not airplane engines. The throaty growl of expensive cars. A motorcade. Heads near the windows began to turn. A murmur started low and curious. "Who's that?" someone asked. "Were we expecting anyone else?" Victoria frowned. "No one of importance arrives this late," she said dismissively. But her instincts, honed over 60 years of social warfare, prickled with unease. The double doors at the entrance of the ballroom opened, and the entire room turned to look. A woman stood in the doorway, tall, composed, wearing an emerald gown that seemed to drink the light and give it back brighter. She did not rush in, she did not look nervous or apologetic. She stood there for one heartbeat, too, letting the room absorb her, and there was something in her bearing, some quiet, absolute authority that made even the wealthiest people in Chicago fall silent. And then a champagne glass shattered on the floor. It had slipped from Ethan Harrington's hand. He was staring at the doorway, his face draining of every drop of color. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Because the woman standing there, impossible, unbelievable, was Olivia. The woman he had thrown away with one suitcase 18 days ago. The woman who was supposed to be waiting tables somewhere broken and forgotten. Olivia! Madison followed his gaze. Wait, isn't that's your ex-wife? What is she doing here? How did she even get in? Victoria's face had gone rigid. That's impossible, she hissed. She can't afford to be in the same zip code as this event. Someone call security. Now. Get her out before she embarrasses. But the security guards were not moving toward Olivia. In fact, 2 of them had positioned themselves on either side of her, not to remove her but to escort her, protecting her. A different murmur rolled through the crowd now. Recognition. Confusion. Olivia began to walk into the room, and as she passed the most powerful people in Chicago, something extraordinary happened. They reacted to her. A media mogul leaned to his wife and whispered urgently. A senator straightened. An elderly woman in diamonds, the matriarch of one of the oldest families in the city, actually rose halfway from her seat, her eyes wide with astonishment. Is that, the senator said slowly, is that a Blackwell? The word moved through the ballroom like a current of electricity. Blackwell, Blackwell. People who had spent their entire lives clawing for relevance felt it in their bones the way a small animal feels the shadow of something vastly larger passing overhead. Ethan heard it too. He grabbed a passing waiter by the arm. What did they just say? What name did they say? But Olivia was already moving toward him, calm and unhurried, and the crowd parted before her like water. Victoria recovered first because Victoria always recovered first. She stepped forward to intercept this intruder, her voice low and venomous, meant only for Olivia's ears. I don't know what game you think you're playing, you pathetic little girl, but you are going to turn around and walk out of here before I have you removed and arrested. You have humiliated this family enough. Olivia stopped, and she looked at the woman who had slapped her across the face 18 days ago, who had thrown divorce papers at her and called her worthless, and she smiled. It was not a cruel smile. That was what made it so devastating. It was the gentle, patient smile of someone who has nothing left to fear. Hello, Victoria, she said quietly. You look well, though I have to say you look a little pale. Are you feeling all right? How dare you speak to me? You should sit down, Olivia continued in the same calm voice, because in just a few minutes you're going to hear some news, and I'd hate for you to fall. Before Victoria could respond, a man in an impeccable suit approached the group, a man Ethan recognized instantly and felt his stomach drop at the sight of. It was Gerald Vance, one of the most powerful financiers on the East Coast, a man whose phone calls Ethan had been trying and failing to get returned for 2 years. And Gerald Vance walked right past Ethan as if he did not exist. Miss Blackwell, Vance said, and he actually bowed his head slightly. It is an honor. I had no idea you'd be attending tonight. Your grandfather and I served on a foundation board together years ago. How is William? Sharp as ever, Mr. Vance, Olivia replied warmly. He sends his regards. He told me to tell you he still hasn't forgiven you for that hand of poker in '98. Vance laughed a genuine, delighted laugh. Tell him the offer for a rematch still stands. He glanced at Ethan and Victoria, who were standing frozen, and a flicker of confusion crossed his face. Do you know the Harringtons? The question hung in the air like a blade. Olivia turned and looked at Ethan, really looked at him for the first time since she had walked through those doors. He was staring at her with an expression she had waited 3 years to see and had finally stopped wanting. Need. Desperation. The dawning, horrified understanding of a man watching the ground crumble beneath his feet. We've met, Olivia said simply, and that was when Ethan finally found his voice. Liv, he said, and his voice cracked. Liv, what I don't. How do you know Gerald Vance? How are you? What is happening? Your name. They keep saying Blackwell. Why are they calling you Blackwell? Olivia looked at him for a long moment, and then she said softly, almost kindly, because that's my name, Ethan. It always was. Olivia Blackwell, granddaughter of William Blackwell, the man whose company you've been trying to get a meeting with for 8 months. The blood drained completely from Ethan's face. "Blackwell Global Holdings," he whispered. "No, no, that's not possible. You were nobody. You were a designer. Your name was Carter. You came from nothing. I came from Virginia," Olivia said. "From 300 acres and 4 generations and a grandfather who built one of the largest investment empires in America. I gave it all up. Do you want to know why?" She stepped closer, and her voice dropped so that only he could hear it. "Because I wanted to know if a man could love me for nothing. Just me. No fortune, no name, no power. I gave you a chance most women in my position never get. I came to you as nobody, Ethan, so that I would know for certain that whatever you felt was real." She paused. "And 18 days ago you gave me your answer. You worried about your watches." Ethan's mouth opened and closed. He looked like a man drowning in air. Victoria, meanwhile, had begun to do the math, and the horror spreading across her face was the most satisfying thing Olivia had witnessed in 3 years. Because Victoria, unlike her son, understood power. She understood exactly what it meant that a Blackwell had been living under her roof, eating at her table, absorbing her insults in silence. The merger. Victoria breathed, her hand flying to her throat. The controlling shareholder, the silent partner you couldn't identify. She turned to Olivia, and for the first time in her entire life, Victoria Harrington looked afraid. "It's you, the vote. You hold the vote." The murmur in the room had grown into open buzzing now. People had their phones out. Word was spreading through the gala, then beyond it into the wider world. The discarded ex-wife was a Blackwell. The silent partner had a face, and she had just walked into the most important night of Ethan Harrington's life. Madison Sterling, who had been standing in stunned silence, suddenly let go of Ethan's arm as if it had burned her. "Wait," she said, her voice rising with panic. "Wait. You told me the vote was a formality. You told me the deal was guaranteed. Ethan, you told me your career was about to make us the most powerful couple in Chicago. If she controls the vote, then—" She stopped. Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God, you don't have anything. Without that deal, you have nothing but debt. You lied to me." "Madison, you told me you were a titan," Madison said, backing away. "You're not a titan. You're a man who threw away a Blackwell and didn't even know it." She turned and walked off into the crowd, and she did not look back. Ethan barely noticed her leave. His entire world had narrowed to the woman in the emerald gown standing in front of him. "Live," he said, and now he was pleading. "Live, please. Whatever you're planning, whatever you came here to do, we can talk about it. The merger, it's everything. It's my whole future, my family's future. If you kill that deal, you destroy me. You destroy everything I've built." And here Olivia felt it, the thing her grandfather had warned her about. The pull, the temptation. It would be so easy, so satisfying to lean in and whisper that yes, she had come to destroy him, that she had spent 18 days dreaming of this exact moment, that this was her revenge for 3 years of humiliation. But that was the small thing. That was what the broken woman who walked out of the penthouse would have wanted. She was not that woman anymore. "Ethan," she said quietly, "I'm not here to destroy you. I want you to understand that. Whatever happens tonight, I did not come here for revenge." "Then what?" he demanded. "What do you want?" Olivia glanced toward the stage where the announcer was still waiting, where the spotlight still burned, where in a few minutes Ethan was supposed to make the announcement that would crown him king of the city. "Go," she said. "Make your speech. Announce your merger. Stand on that stage and tell everyone about the deal that's going to make you untouchable." She met his eyes. "And then we'll see what kind of man you really are when the truth comes out. All of it." "What truth? Liv, what are you talking about? What truth?" But Olivia had already turned away. She walked calm and unhurried to an empty seat at the front of the room, directly in Ethan's line of sight from the stage, and she sat down, folding her hands in her lap, like a woman settling in to watch a performance. Victoria grabbed her son's arm, her nails digging in. "Don't go up there," she hissed. "Something is wrong. She knows something. Cancel the announcement. Postpone it. We need to find out what she's planning before you say a single word." But it was too late. The announcer had already seen, Ethan had already gestured toward the stage, was already speaking into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the man of the hour, Mr. Ethan Harrington." The room burst into applause. Hundreds of the most powerful people in America turned toward the stage waiting. and Ethan Harrington, trapped, terrified, with no idea what was about to happen, but unable to refuse the spotlight, looked at his mother, looked at the crowd, looked one last time at the woman in the emerald gown sitting in the front row with that calm, patient, devastating expression on her face. And he walked up onto the stage. His legs felt like water. The lights were blinding. He gripped the podium to keep his hands from shaking, and he forced a smile onto his face, the charming smile that had opened 1,000 doors. But behind that smile, his mind was screaming, "She knows something. What does she know? What truth? Good evening, everyone." He began, his voice not quite steady. "Thank you all for being here on this historic night." The applause settled. The room waited. In the front row, Olivia Blackwell sat perfectly still, and she watched her former husband stand beneath the spotlight on the most important night of his life. She thought about the file her grandfather had shown her, the inflated valuations, the $2 billion in hidden debt, the collapse that was coming 18 months down the road that would take the Harrington family down with it. She thought about her decision, the one she had made in the study in Virginia, the one even her grandfather had not asked her to explain. And as Ethan opened his mouth to announce the merger that he believed would save him, the merger that would in fact be the thing that destroyed him, Olivia rose slowly from her seat. The entire room turned to look at her. Ethan froze mid-sentence, the words dying on his lips. And in the silence that followed, a silence so complete you could hear the chandeliers humming, Olivia Blackwell spoke, her voice clear and calm and carrying to every corner of that vast ballroom. "Before you continue, Ethan," she said, "there's something everyone in this room needs to know first." For a moment that stretched into eternity, no one in that ballroom moved. Ethan stood frozen at the podium, the spotlight burning down on him, and Olivia stood in the front row in her emerald gown, and between them hung a silence so heavy it pressed on every chest in the room. "Liv," Ethan said finally, his voice trembling into the microphone, carrying out across the hundreds of guests. "Whatever you're about to do, please, not like this, not in front of everyone." "I'm not going to do anything cruel, Ethan," Olivia said, and then she turned slowly to face the room. Hundreds of the most powerful faces in America turned with her. "But before this man asks any of you to invest your trust, your reputations, and in many cases your money into the merger, he's about to announce you deserve to know the truth about that deal, because I've read it, every page, and I am the controlling shareholder whose approval it requires." A wave of shock rolled through the ballroom. People who had come expecting a coronation realized they were witnessing something else entirely. Up on the stage, Ethan's mind raced. "She's lying," he said desperately, looking out at the crowd. "She's my ex-wife. She's bitter. This is a personal vendetta. She's trying to humiliate me, Mr. Harrington." A new voice cut through the room. It was Gerald Vance rising from his table, and when Gerald Vance stood, people listened. "I've known the Blackwell family for 30 years. If Olivia Blackwell says she controls the vote on your merger, then she controls the vote on your merger. The only question I have is why a man trying to close the most important deal of his life never bothered to find out who held that vote." He paused, and his next words landed like a hammer. "Or did you simply never realize you'd married her?" The room erupted, gasps, murmurs, phones rising into the air, and Victoria Harrington, sitting at the head table, looked like she might be physically ill. Ethan gripped the podium. "Liv, please, just let me talk to you privately. We can work this out. I know we can. The deal is good. It's a good deal. It's going to make everything right. It's going to fix everything." "That's exactly why I have to speak now," Olivia said gently. "Because you believe that. You truly believe this deal will save you. And that's the most painful part of all." She walked toward the stage slowly, her heels clicking against the polished floor, every eye in the room tracking her. "Ethan, do you know why no one could identify the controlling shareholder? Because that shareholder structured it that way on purpose. 11 layers of holding companies. My grandfather built that wall years ago, long before I ever met you. And the reason he built it was so that the person holding that vote could decide a deal's fate based purely on its merits, not on who was flattering them, not on social pressure, not on personal feeling, on the truth of the numbers alone." "Aha!" She reached the foot of the stage and looked up at him. "So let's talk about the numbers." "Olivia, don't." "Callaway Industries," she said, her voice ringing clear through the silent room. "The company you're merging with, Ladies and gentlemen, on paper Callaway looks like a gold mine. Strong revenue, expanding markets, healthy assets. That's what Ethan Harrington was shown. That's what he believed. That's what he bet his entire family's future on. She turned to face the crowd. But I spent 11 hours reading the actual financials, not the summary, the real documents. And here's what I found. Callaway's assets are inflated by nearly 400%. Their revenue figures include contracts that were canceled months ago, and buried in the debt structure is $2 billion in liabilities that don't appear anywhere in the executive summary the Harringtons were given. The room had gone deathly quiet now. These were not ordinary people. These were investors, financiers, people who understood exactly what those words meant. If this merger goes through, Olivia continued, the Harrington Company doesn't become untouchable. It becomes a corpse walking. Within 18 months, the hidden debt surfaces, the inflated assets collapse, and the entire enterprise implodes, taking down every investor, every employee, and every partner who trusted Ethan Harrington's judgment tonight. She looked up at him. You weren't building an empire, Ethan. You were buying your own funeral. And the worst part is you had no idea. You were so desperate to prove yourself, so hungry for your mother's approval, that you stopped checking the numbers and started believing the dream. On stage, Ethan had gone very still. That's not, he started, and then stopped, because something in his face had changed. The desperation was giving way to something else, doubt. He had seen the executive summary. He had trusted it. But he had never read all 2,000 pages himself. He had been too busy celebrating. How? He said hoarsely. How do you know all this? Because you taught me to read a balance sheet, Ethan, Olivia said softly. Every night after you fell asleep bragging about deals I supposedly couldn't understand, I read. I learned. The wife you treated like furniture spent 3 years quietly becoming someone who could see exactly what you couldn't. She let that sink in. And the granddaughter of William Blackwell spent the last 3 weeks confirming it with the best analysts in the country. A man at one of the far tables suddenly stood up. He was sweating, his face pale. I'm an investor in Callaway, he said, his voice shaking. I put in $12 million. Are you telling me? I'm telling you to call your lawyers in the morning, Olivia said, not unkindly. And I'm telling everyone in this room with exposure to either of these companies the same thing. Now you know. What you do with it is your choice. But at least now it's an informed one. The ballroom dissolved into chaos, people reaching for phones, voices rising, the careful glittering order of the gala cracking apart in real time. And in the middle of it all, Ethan Harrington stood alone on a stage that was supposed to be his coronation, watching his empire turn to ash before he'd even finished his opening sentence. Victoria rose from her chair. She crossed the room with her chin high, refusing to let the crowd see her break, and she stopped in front of Olivia. For a moment, the two women simply looked at each other. The matriarch who had thrown divorce papers in a young woman's face, and the young woman who now held the family's entire future in her hands. What do you want? Victoria said low and tight. Name it. Money. An apology. You want me on my knees. Is that it? You want to watch me beg? Her voice shook. Fine. You've won. You're a Blackwell. We're nothing to you. So tell me what it costs to make you walk away and let my son keep his dignity. And here it was. The moment Olivia had imagined 1,000 times in those first raw nights of her pain. Victoria Harrington, the woman who had tormented her for 3 years, standing in front of her defeated, ready to beg. All Olivia had to do was twist the knife. One sentence, one public humiliation to repay 3 years of them. She looked at Victoria for a long, long moment, and then she said something no one expected. I don't want anything from you, Victoria. Victoria blinked. What? I don't want your money. I don't want your apology. I don't want you on your knees. Olivia's voice was quiet, but it carried because the room had hushed again to hear her. Do you know what you never understood about me in 3 years? Not once. You looked at me and you saw a social climber, a gold digger, a woman who wanted what you had. But I already had everything you have, Victoria. I had more. I walked away from more wealth than the Harrington name has ever seen, and I did it gladly, because I wanted something money can't buy. I wanted to be loved for who I am. She shook her head slowly. You spent 3 years trying to humiliate someone who was never beneath you, and the tragedy is you'll spend the rest of your life knowing it. Victoria's mouth opened, but nothing came out, because there was no answer to that. There was no counterattack. Olivia had not insulted her. She had simply told the truth, and the truth was more devastating than any insult could ever be. Then Olivia turned back toward the stage, toward Ethan, who was still standing there frozen, the ruins of his ambitions scattered around him. And now she said the decision everyone is waiting for, the merger vote. The room held its breath. As the controlling shareholder, the deal cannot proceed without my approval. She paused. And I'm voting no. A collective gasp. Not because I'm a bitter ex-wife, she continued, and now she was speaking as much to the cameras as to the room. Not because I want revenge. I'm voting no because the deal is reckless, fraudulent in its valuations, and dangerous to every shareholder and employee attached to it. I'm voting no because it's the right thing to do. If Ethan Harrington had married a different woman, if some stranger held this vote, the answer would be exactly the same. The deal dies tonight because it deserves to die, not because of who I am to him, because of what it is. And that, more than anything else that happened that night, was the moment the room turned, because the people in that ballroom had come expecting a scene, a jilted woman's revenge, a spectacle, and instead they had watched someone exercise power with restraint, judgment, and integrity. They had watched a leader, a woman at a nearby table. The elderly matriarch, who had half risen when Olivia first entered, spoke into the silence, her voice carrying the weight of decades. William Blackwell's granddaughter, she said with something like awe. My God, he raised her right. Up on the stage, Ethan Harrington had stopped fighting. The desperation had drained out of him completely, leaving something rawer behind. Understanding. He was finally seeing her, truly seeing her for the first time in the 4 years he had known her. And what he saw broke something inside him. You saved me, he said. His voice was barely a whisper, but the microphone caught it, and it carried to the whole room. You just killed my deal in front of everyone I know. You destroyed my announcement, my reputation, my everything I've worked for. And you saved my life, both at the same time. Didn't you? Yes, Olivia said simply. Why? He asked, and his voice cracked. After everything. After my mother, after the watches, after I let her throw those papers in your face and I just stood there and did nothing. Why would you save me? Olivia was quiet for a moment, and when she answered, there was no anger in her voice, only a kind of weary, hard-won peace. Because 18 days ago you turned me into someone who wanted to destroy you, she said, and I refuse to let you have that. I refuse to let the worst thing you ever did to me change who I am. Saving your company instead of destroying it wasn't a gift to you, Ethan. It was a gift to myself. It's how I proved to me that you never broke me, that the woman who walked out of that penthouse with one suitcase was always stronger than the family who threw her away. She turned to leave, and then she stopped and looked back at him one last time. You'll survive this, she said. You'll lose the deal, you'll lose some face, your stock will take a hit. But your company will still be standing in 2 years, which is more than I can say if I'd let you have what you wanted. Someday when you're calmer, you'll understand what happened here tonight, and maybe you'll become a better man for it. I hope you do, truly. She paused. But I won't be here to see it, because I have finally completely outgrown you. And with that, Olivia Blackwell walked out of the ballroom. She did not rush. She did not look back. She moved through the parting crowd with the same calm authority she had walked in with, and as she passed, something remarkable happened. People began to nod to her, some of the most powerful people in America inclining their heads in respect to the woman who had just turned a coronation into a reckoning. The senator, the matriarch, Gerald Vance, who raised his glass to her silently as she passed. Behind her, the ballroom was in pandemonium. Investors were already fleeing the Callaway deal. Reporters were filing stories that would dominate the financial news for a week. And Ethan Harrington stood alone on his stage, watching the only woman who had ever truly seen him, the only woman he had ever truly failed to see walk out of his life forever. Victoria reached him as the crowd thinned. Ethan, she said. Ethan, we need to manage this. The press, the investors, we can spin this, we can... She stopped because her son was not listening. He was staring at the door as Olivia had walked through. Did you know? He asked quietly. Know what? Did you know who she was? Is that why you wanted her gone so badly? Did you somehow find out she was a Blackwell and you... Don't be absurd, Victoria snapped. If I had known she was a Blackwell, I would have... She stopped herself. But it was too late. The truth had already escaped into the air between them. You would have what mother, Ethan said, turning to look at her with new eyes. You would have kept her, welcomed her, loved her, even because of her name, her money." He laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "That's exactly who she walked away from. That's exactly the kind of love she was running from when she married me as nobody. And we proved her right. Both of us. We proved that people like us only love what we can take." "Ethan, get away from me," he said, not angrily, just exhausted. "Just get away from me. I need to think." Outside, Olivia stepped into the cool Chicago night. The 3 black cars were waiting. Daniels held the door. "Miss Blackwell," he said, "your grandfather is on the line. He watched the whole thing." He handed her the phone, and there was something on the usually impassive driver's face that looked almost like pride. Olivia took the phone and she got into the car, and as the door closed and the noise of the gala fell away behind her, she lifted it to her ear. "Grandfather," she said. For a moment there was only silence on the line, and then William Blackwell spoke, and his voice was thick with an emotion she had almost never heard from him. "Olivia," he said, "in 60 years of business I have watched a great many people gain power, and almost all of them the moment they got it used it to wound someone who had wounded them. It is the most natural thing in the world, the most human thing." He paused. "You had every reason, every justification. The entire world would have understood, even applauded, if you had stood up tonight and destroyed that man and his mother. And instead," his voice broke just slightly, "instead you used the greatest power you will ever hold to do the harder thing, the right thing. You saved the man who betrayed you, and you walked away clean." "I learned it from you," Olivia said softly. "No," William said. "I taught you the numbers. I taught you the boardrooms. But what you did tonight, that grace, that strength, that mercy, that did not come from me, Olivia. That came from you. That was always in you. The Harringtons never saw it, but it was always, always there." He took a breath. "Come home. There's a great deal of work ahead of us. The board wants to meet you. The whole world wants to know who Olivia Blackwell is now." "I'm coming home," she said. And as the car pulled away from the gala, carrying her back toward the jet, back toward Virginia, back toward the life she was finally ready to claim, Olivia looked out the window at the glittering city behind her, the city where she had been broken and where she had been reborn. She did not feel triumphant. She did not feel vengeful. She felt for the first time in 3 years completely and entirely free. And somewhere behind her, in a ballroom full of shattered ambition and whispered headlines, a man stood alone on an empty stage, finally understanding what he had thrown away with one suitcase 18 days before. The months that followed moved faster than anyone could have predicted. The headlines came first, the morning after the gala. Blackwell Harris reveals herself, kills, doomed merger. Investors who had been seconds away from sinking their fortunes into the Callaway deal woke up to find that a woman in an emerald gown had saved them from ruin. By noon, 3 separate financial regulators had opened investigations into Callaway Industries. By the end of the week, the truth Olivia had exposed was confirmed in full. The assets were inflated, the debt was real, the company was a house of cards. And every investor in that ballroom understood that Olivia Blackwell had not destroyed Ethan Harrington that night. She had saved every last one of them. But for the Harrington family, the reckoning had only just begun. It turned out the merger had not been Ethan's only reckless gamble. Once the financial press started digging, they found a pattern: years of arrogant decisions, over-leveraged deals, contracts, signed on ego rather than analysis. The Harrington empire, which had looked so solid from the outside, had been rotting from within for a long time. The merger was simply going to be the final fatal blow, and now that the world was looking closely, the whole structure began to tremble. Victoria Harrington fought it with everything she had. She called in favors, she made threats, she showed up at galas with her chin held high, daring anyone to whisper. But Chicago has a long memory and a sharp tongue, and the story of how the great Harrington matriarch had thrown divorce papers in the face of a Blackwell, had slapped her, had called her worthless. That story spread through every drawing room in the city. The very society Victoria had spent her life clawing her way into now turned its back on her. Not loudly. Society never does it loudly. Just 100 small doors quietly closing. "They won't return my calls," Victoria said one evening, sitting in the family's now too quiet mansion. The servants had been let go, most of them. The cars sold. 60 years I built this family's name, and one girl in a green dress undid all of it in a single night. She didn't undo it, Mother, Ethan said. He was sitting across from her, and he looked older than he had at the gala. The arrogance gone from his face, replaced by something quieter and harder. We undid it. She just turned on the lights so everyone could see what was already there. How can you defend her? I'm not defending her. I'm finally telling the truth, which is something this family stopped doing a long time ago. Meanwhile, in Virginia, Olivia was not watching the Harringtons fall. That was the thing that surprised everyone, including herself. She could have. She had the power, the resources, the perfect justification. She could have spent those months finishing what the gala started, twisting every knife, closing every door. Plenty of people expected her to. The financial world held its breath, waiting for the Blackwell heiress to grind her former in-laws into dust. She did the opposite. She got to work building. You're not even watching the news about them, William observed one morning, finding her buried in proposals in the study. The whole world expects the next blow to come from you, and you're sitting here reading grant applications. Because hurting them won't make me feel anything, grandfather, Olivia said, not looking up. I felt it that night just for a second when Victoria stood in front of me ready to beg. I felt the pull, and I realized that if I chase it, I'll spend the next 10 years of my life thinking about them, tying myself to them, letting the worst people I've ever known live rent-free in my head. She finally looked up. I didn't get my life back just to spend it obsessing over the people who took it. They don't get that. They don't get any more of me. William studied her for a long moment, and then he nodded slowly. And so, the grant applications. She slid one across the desk to him. I want to use the Blackwell name for something other than making money. I've been thinking about it since the night of the gala, standing in that room full of the richest people in America and realizing that almost none of them had ever used their power to do anything but get more power. She tapped the folder. I want to do it differently. What followed became, over the next year, one of the most talked about transformations in American business. Olivia Blackwell took her seat on the board of Blackwell Global Holdings, and she did not behave like an heiress playing at business. She worked harder than anyone. She arrived first and left last. She earned the respect of executives twice her age, not because of her name, but because she was quite simply brilliant at it. The instincts she had developed during 3 years of silent observation, the eye for hidden weakness, the gift for seeing what others missed, made her one of the sharpest minds in the company. But it was what she did with her power that made her legendary. She launched an initiative to invest in small businesses, the kind the big banks ignored: family operations and first-time entrepreneurs and people with nothing but a good idea and no connections. She remembered all too well what it felt like to be dismissed as nobody. So she went looking for the nobodies, and she bet on them. This one, she said one afternoon, sliding a file to her team. A woman in Ohio, single mother. She's developed a manufacturing process that could employ 40 people in a town that's lost most of its industry. The banks turned her down 4 times. Her credit history is thin, one of the analysts noted carefully. And she has no industry connections, no pedigree. I know exactly what she has, Olivia said quietly. She has a good idea and no one willing to look past where she came from. Fund it. She paused. And I want to meet her personally. I always want to meet them personally. She created scholarship programs for students who, like the woman from Ohio, had everything except connections. She expanded healthcare projects into communities that had been written off as unprofitable. And in perhaps the most pointed move of all, when a mid-sized manufacturing firm with 800 employees was about to be liquidated by a competitor, 800 families about to lose everything, Olivia stepped in and bought it. Not because it was a good investment, because 800 people would have lost their jobs. That deal will barely break even for years, William warned her. Then it'll break even, Olivia said, and 800 people will keep their homes. Grandfather, when you taught me the difference between rich and powerful, you said, power is what you are. Well, this is what I want to be. William Blackwell, 81 years old and not given to displays of emotion, looked at his granddaughter for a long moment, and then he said something he had never said to anyone in his life. I built this empire for 60 years, and I always assumed my greatest creation was the company. I was wrong. It was you. It was always going to be you. The story of the Blackwell heiress, who used her fortune to lift up the forgotten, became its own kind of headline, the opposite of the one she'd made at the gala. And slowly, the woman who had once been called a social climber, a gold digger, a burden, became one of the most admired figures in American business. not for her wealth, for what she chose to do with it. And then, almost a full year after the night of the gala, Olivia received a request she had not expected. Ethan Harrington wanted to meet. Her assistant relayed the message carefully, watching her face. He says he's not asking for money. He's not asking for business. He says he just wants 20 minutes. You can say no. After everything, no one would blame you. Olivia was quiet for a long moment. The old Olivia, the one who had walked out of that penthouse, would have said no. The Olivia from the early raw days of her pain might have said yes just to see him grovel. But the woman she had become simply felt a kind of distant, peaceful curiosity. "Tell him I'll give him 20 minutes, she said, "at my office, next week." He arrived exactly on time, and when he walked in, Olivia almost did not recognize him. The Ethan she had married had been polished, confident, always performing. The man who walked into her office was none of those things. He was thinner. His expensive clothes were gone, replaced by something simpler. But the biggest change was in his eyes. The arrogance had burned away entirely, and in its place was something she had never seen in him before: humility. "Thank you for seeing me," he said. He didn't sit until she gestured for him to. "I know you didn't have to." "What happened to your family's company?" she asked. "Gone, mostly. We sold off the pieces that were worth anything, paid down what debt we could." He gave a small, rueful laugh. "Turns out the merger you killed was just the part that would have happened fastest. The rot was everywhere. You didn't cause the collapse, Liv. You just exposed it a year before it would have buried hundreds of innocent people instead of just us. And your mother," his face tightened. "She doesn't understand what happened. She still thinks she's a victim. She thinks the world conspired against her. She'll go to her grave believing it." He looked down at his hands. "I used to be exactly like her. I wanted you to know that I know that now." "Why are you here, Ethan?" I took a breath, and when he looked up, his eyes were wet. "I came to apologize, not to win you back. I know that's gone. I know I have absolutely no right to it. And not to ask for anything. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not here for money or a job or a second chance. I'm here because for the first time in my life I understand exactly what I did. And I needed to say it to your face the way I should have stood up for you to my mother's face 3 years ago, and never did." Olivia said nothing. She let him speak. "I let her humiliate you for 3 years, he said, his voice shaking. "I watched her treat you like dirt, and I told myself it wasn't my problem, that you'd handle it, that it would blow over. I worried about my career while you withered in my house. I had the most extraordinary woman I will ever know living right beside me, and I was too busy chasing my mother's approval to even look at her." A tear slipped down his cheek. "And on the last morning when she threw those papers in your face, when she slapped you, I stood there. I looked at the floor, and I let it happen. Because I was a coward, Liv. I was a weak, ambitious coward, and I threw away the only real thing I ever had because I didn't have the courage to recognize it." He wiped his face. "I'm sorry. I am so deeply, completely sorry. You didn't deserve any of it, and I will carry what I did to you for the rest of my life." The office was silent. Outside, the city moved on indifferent, and Olivia Blackwell looked at the man she had once loved with her entire heart, the man she had given up a fortune and a name to be with, the man who had broken her so badly she'd had to rebuild herself from nothing. And she discovered something that surprised her. She felt no anger, no bitterness, no lingering pain. She felt only a kind of gentle, clear-eyed compassion, the way you might feel toward a stranger telling you a sad story. "I accept your apology, Ethan," she said quietly. His head came up, startled. You do?" "I do, and I want you to hear this because it matters." She leaned forward slightly. "I'm not accepting it because you've earned it, or because I owe you anything, or because I've forgotten what you did. I'm accepting it because holding on to it would cost me, and it would cost you nothing. I let go of what happened in that penthouse a long time ago. The day I walked out of it, actually. I just didn't know it yet." She paused. "You spent 3 years making me feel small. And the strange thing is I have to thank you for it. Because if you'd loved me, if you'd been a good husband, I would have spent my whole life as Olivia Carter, hiding from who I really was. You breaking my heart is the only reason I ever became myself." Ethan stared at her, tears running freely now. "That might be the most generous thing anyone has ever said to me, and I deserve it the least." "Probably," Olivia agreed, and there was no cruelty in it, just honesty. "But I'm not doing it for you. I stopped doing things for you a long time ago." He nodded slowly. He understood. He stood to leave, and at the door he paused and turned back one last time. I hope you have a wonderful life, Liv. I mean that. I think you're going to do extraordinary things. I think you already are. I know I am, Olivia said, not arrogantly, just simply the way you state a fact. And Ethan Harrington walked out of her office and out of her life for the last time. She did not watch him go. She had already turned back to her work, to the proposals on her desk, to the future she was building. He was, she realized finally and completely, just a man she used to know. That evening she drove back to the estate in Virginia. William was waiting on the front steps as he had been the first day she came home, a broken woman with one suitcase. But the woman who stepped out of the car now was unrecognizable from that one. She walked tall, her eyes were clear. She carried herself like someone who knew exactly who she was and would never again let anyone tell her otherwise. He came then, William said. It was not a question. He came, he apologized, I accepted it, and I let him go. She climbed the steps and stood beside her grandfather, looking out over the 300 acres in the fading light. It's over, grandfather, all of it. Not because I won, because I finally don't care whether I did. William was quiet for a moment. Then he said, When you called me from that street corner in Chicago a year ago, you said 3 words. Do you remember? I said I'm ready to come home. You were wrong, though, he said gently. You weren't ready to come home. You were ready to start becoming the woman who could. He turned to look at her. And now you're home, Olivia. Truly, not the house, not the name, yourself. You finally came home to yourself. Olivia Blackwell stood at the top of the steps of the estate where she had been a child, the head of an empire she was reshaping in her own image, a woman who had been thrown away with a single suitcase and had returned to remake the world on her own terms. The girl who once signed her divorce papers in silence, who had been slapped and called worthless and told she would leave with nothing, now stood at the head of a global fortune that she was using to lift up everyone the world had forgotten. And she understood finally the lesson that had cost her everything and given her everything in return. Her worth had never been in Ethan's love or Victoria's approval or the Harrington name or even the Blackwell fortune. Her worth had been in her the whole time, waiting for the day she would stop measuring herself by the opinions of people who only saw what they could take from her. The people who underestimate you only ever see the version of you that serves them. The people who throw you away never once imagined who you might become without them. And the greatest revenge in this world is not making them suffer. It is becoming so completely, so powerfully, so unshakably yourself that their cruelty becomes the very thing that set you free. Olivia Blackwell had not just survived being thrown away. She had risen higher than the people who discarded her could ever have dreamed, and she had done it without ever once lowering herself to their level. And that in the end was the woman she had always been meant to become.